Week 0 and week 1 are now officially over, and we're going to go back all the way to week 0 to kind of start going over our reactions to what happened these past few weeks. Iowa State and Kansas State, pretty big game to start the year. It was actually very close, which is really what we expected. We had Kansas State winning. I'm not surprised that the Cyclones got it done, but this is now looking a little bit worse for Iowa State given what Kansas State did this week. We'll get to that a little bit later.
UNLV and Idaho State was supposed to be a big blowout for the Rebels with this big transfer class that they brought in, and they were trailing for a good majority of this game. UNLV was one of the teams we thought had a good chance to make the college football playoffs as the group of five representative.
Kansas took care of business against Fresno State. Hawaii beat Stanford. That one was a little bit surprising, but not that much because Stanford, we already expected to be really bad. I think we predicted them to win like 2 or 3 games this year. We had them beating Hawaii, but it really doesn't shock me that Stanford's bad enough to lose to them. There's the Boise State one on Thursday night. They got blown out by South Florida. And if you watched our short, we had Boise State winning, but I did say that South Florida has a very solid roster and that a lot of people were underrating them coming into this game. I had no idea they were going to blow out Boise State like they did, but I really am not surprised that the Bulls ended up getting that win.
And that means the Bulls are the current front runner for that group of five representation for the playoffs. Rutgers winning a close one over Ohio. Still a pretty solid win considering what Ohio brought back. NC State gets their revenge over East Carolina after the Pirates beat them in the bowl game last year. So that's a big win for this young NC State team. Even if it is a close game, this East Carolina team has some good players. So another solid win for the Wolfpack there.
Duke struggled for a tiny bit against Elon, but they ended up taking care of business. That one wasn't a super big deal. Minnesota got a little bit of a closer win than I expected against Buffalo. Still took care of business at home. Nebraska, Cincinnati, one of the better games of the week as well. It was pretty low scoring. I think Dylan Raiola looked solid enough, but Nebraska, in my opinion, should have won this game by a little bit more. Moving into Friday, really just two big games at the end of the night to talk about. The first one, Auburn looks like a legitimate team. We were not quite as high on them, and we were a lot more high on Baylor. And Baylor, while they didn't necessarily play bad, still lost by 2 touchdowns at home. This is a very, very good Auburn team.
And the big thing for Baylor, like Jonas said, offensively, they played great. They didn't turn the ball over. Sawyer Robertson threw for over 400 yards and the three touchdowns. But the problem is the defense could not stop the run game of Auburn, particularly Jackson Arnold. And that's going to be the biggest reason why Auburn is going to be successful this year if Jackson Arnold can continue to be such a dangerous dual threat quarterback. And then the other game, Georgia Tech getting a huge win on the road at Boulder against Colorado. This Georgia Tech team, we were pretty high on going into this year, and this was going to be the real test for them early on in the season. And Colorado didn't look bad either until the end of the game when they still had two timeouts on their final drive, but did not use either of them. So a huge win for Georgia Tech here, but Colorado still has a chance to make some push in the Big 12 conference if they want to compete for a title.
And how about that number 1 and number 3 game, Ohio State and Texas? Very, very close. The Longhorns kind of made it a close one by the end of it, but Ohio State had a shutout until about 4 minutes left. The Buckeyes honestly played really well. Texas didn't play bad either, to be fair. It was a tough road environment. And I think this Ohio State defense is maybe even better than last year. That could just be a week 1 overreaction, but they looked really, really good. The fourth down stops that we saw from them last year were very much a big part of this game. And I think that the Buckeyes are looking like one of the best teams in the country for sure. Texas still should be a top 5 team without a doubt. They made it really close in the end, and I think Arch Manning will start to figure things out as the weeks progress.
Penn State took care of business as they should have against Nevada. And then yet again, we have another top 10 matchup with LSU and Clemson. This time, LSU actually gets the job done in week one. Brian Kelly getting that elusive season opening win against a very good Clemson team. This was a team that we had winning our national championship in our way too early prediction of the playoffs for this year. And I'll admit, LSU did not look very good for the first half of football. Clemson looked like they were in control, kind of similar to the Ohio State-Texas game, a defensive battle, but LSU started to turn it up a notch in the second half, and that's ultimately what got them the win here. I think Clemson still is going to be a very good team, much like Texas is, but they do they do have some things to figure out, particularly that run game. But LSU, that defense is legit. That was the big thing Brian Kelly was hyping up this offseason. LSU is going to be a top five team going through the rest of the season, even with that difficult of a schedule. Garrett Nussmeier had a very solid game as well. This is going to be a scary LSU team to play.
And then the upset of the week, Florida State really manhandled Alabama. Ty Simpson didn't play great in his first start. Could have completed a lot more passes than he did. The completion percentage, I think, is a big issue here. But really, it just didn't look like Alabama wanted it enough. Florida State had a terrible season last year, and we did predict that they were going to be better this year, but I didn't think they were going to be good enough to beat Alabama week one. Now, does that mean that Florida State's actually a really good team this year, or is Alabama way worse than people are expecting? These are the kind of things that you can't really figure out for the next couple weeks because we've only seen one game from these teams. But right now, I'm kind of leaning towards Florida State being a very, very good team this year.
And I think Alabama will have to figure some stuff out because even though Ty Simpson didn't have that great of a game, it wasn't entirely his fault considering Florida State got tons of pressure on him. Alabama just lost this game in the trenches. The offensive line couldn't stop the front seven that Florida State had, and the defense couldn't get any pressure on Thomas Castellanos. So Alabama needs to really look themselves in the mirror and make some changes they want to reroute this season that already is off to a bad start. And then we had another almost upset in the top 25. Kansas State nearly losing to North Dakota. They actually trailed for most of this game and had to come back late in that fourth quarter. And this Kansas State team was one of the favorites to win the Big 12 this year. And but the way this team's been looking these first 2 weeks, I don't know if they're going to be in contention for very long, considering how deep this Big 12 conference is. They need to figure something out as well. Avery Johnson still looks pretty good, but the rest of this team is not nearly as competitive as we initially thought they were going to be. So Kansas State is in a bit of trouble right now.
Indiana didn't look quite as good as the playoff team that they were last year either. At home against Old Dominion, only winning by 13 points, not great there. Tennessee pulled off a pretty solid win against Syracuse in the Aflac kickoff game. And I think that the Vols, we might have underrated little bit. I wasn't expecting Aguilar to step in and be quite as good as he was. The Tennessee offense looks very solid. So I do think that the Vols are once again going to move back up into our top 25. You'll have to check that out a little bit later today. Mississippi State got a very solid win against Southern Miss. I do think they're one of the better group of five teams. So that was good for Mississippi State to pull off that win on the road. It was a potential trap game there for sure.
Speaking of group of five, Tulane absolutely dominated Northwestern. Preston Stone, the Wildcats quarterback, threw four interceptions against the Green Wave, and Jake Retzlaff in his first start, not at BYU, also looked very, very solid. Tulane is once again in contention for that group of five bid to the college football playoffs. We'll see how it goes in their other non-conference games that includes Duke and Ole Miss, considering both those teams did win in week one, but Tulane does seem up to task to take on those teams. Pitt with a very dominant win over Duquesne, even though they're not that good of a team, but it just shows that this Pitt team can be very good. This offense was humming very early on. Eli Holstein and Desmond Reed looked very good in this game.
The Zach Calzada era started off pretty good at Kentucky. It was a little bit closer than I would hope for the Wildcats, but Toledo was a really solid team in the MAC last year, and they did blow out Mississippi State on the road last year. So Kentucky getting this win, avoiding the trap game was good. It was very low scoring until late. A little bit interesting, but the Wildcats got the job done. That's really all that matters. You're just going to have to keep improving in order to win some SEC games this season.
BYU had a very dominant win over Portland State, to be expected, but they still had a true freshman quarterback out there, so it's good to see that the Cougars can still be a pretty productive team. Maybe we will see them jump into the top 25 soon if they're able to continue that dominance against good teams. I'll talk about Washington State real quick, and then I'll do Cal and Oregon State. Washington State did not look very good against Idaho, even if they did get the win. Now, Idaho is still one of the better FCS teams, but this Washington State team, I think, has a slightly better roster than them, and it was a home game too. I don't think it should have been this close, but it's still a win. But Washington State's got a lot of work to do if they want to continue to be a competitive team. And then probably one of the biggest surprises for us, at least, was Cal getting the win on the road against Oregon State. Oregon State was a team we were hyping up to maybe make a push to the college football playoffs, but this Cal team with a true freshman as their starting quarterback was able to get a win over a team with so much returning production. I doubt this will be a continued thing for the Golden Bears. I don't think they will continue to win games against such good teams like this. Maybe Oregon State isn't as good as we thought they were, but I don't think Cal is going to end up being like the team we initially thought they were going to be before they had that mass exodus of players, but still a very solid win for this team considering they were taking a swing with that true freshman quarterback.
Utah absolutely dominated UCLA to open up the Devin Dampier and Nico Iamaleava eras. I think honestly this went about as we expected it to. I don't know if I would have quite picked Utah by 30 plus, but we thought that Utah was going to have a much better season this year. Really like Devin Dampier. We don't hate Nico Iamaleava, but we kind of put a reality check on the UCLA fans this offseason. They have a good quarterback, but you do not have anybody to surround him. And I think that was very evident in this first game and likely will continue to be the story throughout the season. Two games on Sunday. The first one was Virginia Tech and South Carolina. This one pretty low scoring. I thought South Carolina could have won by a little bit more. They didn't really take advantage of opportunities as much as they should have. Kyron Drones did not look great, less than 50% completion, and the Gamecocks were only able to win by 13 points. Miami and Notre Dame had an absolute classic game. The Fighting Irish came back at the very end to make it close, but Miami was able to seal the deal with a field goal. That was just a great game. I think the Hurricanes did deserve the win. But the fight that Notre Dame showed at the end of the game makes me think that they do have a chance to still have a really solid year this season as CJ Carr continues to learn and figure things out.
But that means they need to figure it out quickly because their next test is Texas A&M the following week. If they fall to the Aggies, the rest of the schedule is pretty easy and won't leave them with much room for error if they want to return to the college football playoffs this year. And then finally, to cap off a very dramatic week one, TCU curb stomped Bill Belichick in his first career game as the head coach for North Carolina. TCU just was so dominant. The defense had two touchdowns, a pick six, and a scoop and score. Josh Hoover looked phenomenal and is looking like a really good dark horse candidate for the Heisman Trophy if he continues to play as well as he did against North Carolina. And the Tar Heels actually made a change at their starting quarterback position. Gio Lopez ended up getting pulled. They just could not get a passing game going. I saw something where they actually went a full hour without completing a pass in this game. North Carolina's got a lot to figure out if they want to be even remotely competitive for the rest of the season. Maybe TCU is just that good of a team. We won't know until we see both these teams play a couple more games. But right now, it's looking like TCU is a legitimate contender in college football, and North Carolina is not going to be nearly as good as we initially thought. So that's a wrap for week one. Thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe and check out our top 25 video, which we'll be releasing later on. And we will see you in the next video.